Pack what you need and be out by Sunday. We've already talked to a lawyer. My daughter said those words to me on a Thursday evening, standing in the kitchen of the house where I had taught her to read. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at her husband instead. The way people look at someone when they need to borrow courage they don't have on their own. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 of those years teaching high school history in Carterville, Ohio. I coached junior varsity baseball for 22 seasons. I served on the school board for 8 years. I buried my wife, Carol, on a cold Tuesday in February, 4 years ago, and I planted a dogwood tree in the backyard the following spring because she always said she wanted one. The house I was standing in was my house. My name, Raymond Caldwell, was on the deed. Had been since 1987, when Carol and I paid $43,000 for a property that needed a new roof, new plumbing, and more love than money. I put in the roof myself over 2 summers. I ran the pipes with my neighbor Dale, who used to bring a 6-pack in his belt sander every Saturday morning like it was a religion. My daughter, Melissa, had moved back in 14 months earlier, after her first marriage ended. I told her she could stay as long as she needed. She had brought her son, my grandson Tyler, who was 7 at the time and liked dinosaurs and strawberry jam. I was glad to have them. The house had been too quiet since Carol died. What I had not accounted for was Derek. Derek Shane arrived 6 months after Melissa did, introduced as a friend, then a boyfriend. He worked in something he called property management and development. He wore shoes that cost more than my monthly grocery bill and had a habit of walking through rooms slowly, looking at walls and ceilings the way an appraiser does rather than the way a guest does. I noticed it. I told myself I was being unfair to the man. Carol always said I was slow to warm up to new people, and she was right, so I decided to give Derek time. I took him fishing at Harmon Creek. I watched baseball with him on Sunday afternoons. I asked him about his childhood, his work, his family. He answered in ways that were technically complete but somehow left you with less information than you started with. Carol would have known what to make of him immediately. I just kept waiting for the warmth to come. It did not come. What came instead was a slow renovation of my own house that I had never agreed to. A wall between the dining room and the living room came down while I was at a weekend fishing trip with Dale. New cabinets appeared in the kitchen. The dogwood tree in the backyard was cut down. Derek said it was too close to the foundation, which was not true, and a deck was installed in its place. Every time I raised an objection, Melissa would get a look on her face that was half apology and half exhaustion, and Derek would say something about property values and investment and long-term thinking. I let too much go. I know that now. The Thursday they told me to leave, I had come home from helping Dale winterize his barn. It was October, the kind of Ohio October that smells like wood smoke and cold mud. I came in through the back door, set my boots on the mat Carol had stenciled with cardinals, and found Melissa and Derek sitting at the kitchen table with a folder between them. Melissa spoke first. She said the house was too big for one person to manage, that I would be happier somewhere smaller, that there was a very nice senior living community 20 minutes away in Glenwood that Derek had already toured on my behalf. She used the word transition 4 times in the first 2 minutes. She did not use the word your house, not once. Derek said the papers in the folder were a voluntary transfer of occupancy agreement that a lawyer friend of his had drawn up. He said it was the cleanest way to handle things. He slid the folder across the table toward me. I did not touch it. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. She was looking at the table. "Melissa," I said, "look at me." She did, finally. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. I planted that dogwood for your mother, and he cut it down, and I still didn't say a word. But I am not signing anything, and I am not leaving." Derek started talking about how I was being emotional and how this was a business decision and how I should think about Tyler, which was the moment something shifted in me, not into anger exactly, but into a kind of cold, clear attention. The way I used to feel in the 9th inning with runners on base. I stood up. "I'm going to call my attorney Monday morning," I said, "and I'd suggest you both think carefully about what you've done to this house, and what your names appear on and what they don't." I went upstairs. I heard them arguing in low voices below me. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a while, and I thought about Carol, and I thought about how glad I was that she was not alive to see this day, and also how much I needed her. Then I did something that I think surprised Derek, because people like Derek are always counting on the people they're taking advantage of to be too sad, too old, or too tired to act. I got up, went to my desk, and took out the original deed to the property, which I kept in a locked fireproof box along with our wills, our insurance documents, and the folder of letters Carol had written to me during the 2 years she taught abroad before we were married. I photographed every page with my phone. Then I called Dale and asked if he could recommend a good property attorney. He gave me the name of a woman named Patricia Hines in Carterville who had handled his brother's estate dispute. I called her office and left a voicemail that night. The next morning, I drove to Carterville First Savings, where Carol and I had banked since 1989. I had not been inside the branch in several months, having done most of my banking online, but I wanted to sit down with someone in person. There was an account there, a joint savings account, that Carol and I had opened together before Tyler was born. After Carol died, I had never closed it, because closing it felt like the last administrative act of a death I wasn't ready to finish. Her name was still listed on the account. The funds in it were mine, legally, and I knew that, but I had not touched them in 4 years. I went in and asked to speak with someone about the account. The branch manager, a woman about 40 with reading glasses on a beaded chain, came out and took me to a desk near the window. I gave her the account number. I watched her type it in. The look on her face changed, not into alarm, exactly, but into a specific focused attention that people in that profession get when something requires very careful handling. She said, "Mr. Caldwell, I'm going to need just one moment," and she got up and went to the back, and she was gone for longer than 1 moment. When she came back, she brought a second person with her, a man I didn't know, who introduced himself as the branch compliance officer. He sat down and asked me to confirm my identity, which I did with my driver's license and a second form of ID. He typed something. He turned the monitor slightly toward me. "Are you aware of the activity on this account over the past 19 months?" he said. I was not. What he showed me was a series of transfers, beginning shortly after Derek had moved into my house. Small at first, $200 here, $300 there, and then larger, and then very large. The total amount moved out of that account over 19 months was just under $61,000. Moved to an account I had never seen before, in a name I did not recognize, at a bank 2 states away. The compliance officer asked me again, slowly, whether I had authorized any of these transactions. "No," I said, "I did not." He asked whether I had shared my login information or account credentials with anyone. I thought about the night, 7 months ago, when I had asked Melissa to help me reset a password for an online account because I was struggling with the new phone. She had held the phone for several minutes. I had thought nothing of it at the time. I told him what I remembered. I watched him write it down. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I need to advise you to contact law enforcement as soon as possible. What you're describing, if accurate, constitutes financial elder abuse and unauthorized electronic transfer of funds. These are serious charges." The room was very quiet for a moment. I had taught these kids history. Melissa had sat on my lap while I graded papers. I had coached her in softball when she was 9, before she decided she preferred theater. I had walked her down an aisle once already and watched her cry at the altar in a way that made Carol cry, too, in the 3rd row with a crumpled tissue pressed to her mouth. I said, "I understand. Tell me what I need to do." They helped me freeze the account immediately. The compliance officer gave me the number for the County Financial Crimes Unit and for the State Elder Fraud Hotline. He made copies of everything. He was professional and kind and looked at me with a steadiness that I appreciated because I was not feeling steady. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for about 10 minutes before I drove anywhere. Then I drove to the Carterville police station. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Karen Foss, who had been on the Financial Crimes Unit for 11 years. She had a quiet, thorough manner and asked her questions without editorializing, which I respected. I gave her everything. The bank records the compliance officer had sent to my email, the photographs of my deed, the voicemail I had saved from Derek, an offhand message from 2 months ago in which he referenced, without apparent concern, what's in the joint account, and the name of the attorney Derek had cited when presenting me with the occupancy transfer agreement. She asked me whether I still had access to the house. I said I did. I had not surrendered my keys, and I had not signed anything. She told me not to sign anything, and not to confront anyone further, and to call Patricia Hines first thing Monday morning. I did all 3. Patricia Hines was small, brisk, and so thoroughly unimpressed by what Derek had done that her calm actually steadied me. She had handled 4 cases with similar patterns in the last 3 years, she said. The voluntary transfer of occupancy agreement, she told me after reviewing the photograph I'd sent, had no legal validity whatsoever, as it had been drafted without my participation, signed by no one, and did not change the fact that my name had been on the deed for 37 years. She used the word laughable once, and then composed herself and said legally unenforceable instead. She filed to have the deed certified and recorded with an affidavit of continuous ownership. She also referred me to a colleague who specialized in elder financial fraud cases, a man named Thomas Arkwright, who within a week had joined the civil side of what was quickly becoming a very busy legal situation. Detective Foss moved quickly. The account receiving the fraudulent transfers was traced to an LLC that Derek had incorporated in Nevada 14 months ago, 1 month after moving into my house. The LLC, when examined, turned out to be connected to 2 other properties in neighboring counties, where similar patterns had occurred. Elderly homeowners, adult children with new partners, quiet financial transfers, paperwork that looked legal from a distance but wasn't. Melissa was interviewed twice. The first interview, she maintained she had known nothing. The second interview, after Detective Foss presented records showing that her email address had been used in the setup of the Nevada LLC, produced a different account. She had not, she said, fully understood what Derek was doing. She had done things she was asked to do. She had believed it would not cause real harm. I want to be honest about what I felt when I heard this because I have thought about it many times since. It was not rage. It was a grief so specific and located that it had a shape, like a stone in the chest. She had been my child. I had read to her every night until she was old enough to tell me to stop. I had sat with her in the emergency room when she was 23 and her appendix had ruptured, and I had held her hand for 6 hours while they prepared for surgery. She had been my child, and she had accessed a bank account I shared with her dead mother and moved money out of it for a year and a half. The prosecution charged Derek Shane with elder financial abuse, unauthorized electronic fund transfer, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The total recovered between the frozen account and assets traced through the LLC came to approximately $53,000 out of the $61,000 taken, plus interest and fees ordered by the civil court. Melissa was charged with 1 count of conspiracy. She accepted a plea agreement, probation, mandatory repayment, and 200 hours of community service. She avoided prison. I had not advocated for leniency, but I had not advocated against it either. That felt like the most honest position I could take. Derek received 4 years. There is a particular kind of silence in a house after something like this. I have come to know it well. I relearned every room. I repainted the kitchen a color Carol had picked out years ago and never gotten around to using. I bought a new dogwood tree from the nursery in Millbrook and planted it in the same spot, closer to the back fence this time, further from the foundation, where it could grow without anyone having a reason to cut it down. Tyler came to stay with me for 2 weeks, the following summer, while Melissa was completing her community service hours. He was 9 by then and had moved on from dinosaurs to astronomy. We drove out to the old fairgrounds one night where the light pollution was low, and I showed him the Milky Way, and he was quiet for a long time, in a way that children are quiet when something is genuinely larger than their words. I didn't tell him any of it, of course. He would learn pieces of it someday, in the way that children of troubled families absorb history in fragments and secondhand. All I could do was be something solid he could remember. That fall, I started volunteering at the county senior center in Carterville, 3 mornings a week, helping with a financial literacy program that Detective Foss had connected me with. It was aimed at adults over 60 practical things: how to identify phishing attempts, how to secure accounts, how to recognize the signs of financial manipulation by people close to you. I was not naturally a man who spoke easily about his own experiences. 31 years of teaching had made me comfortable in front of a group, but always with a distance between the subject and myself. This was different. When I sat across from a woman in her 70s who reminded me of Carol's mother and talked about the signs of financial abuse, I was not speaking from a textbook. She could tell, and it changed how she listened. I ran into Patricia Hines at the grocery store on a Tuesday in December, about 18 months after everything had started. She told me the LLC Derek had used had now been connected to a 5th case in 3 counties. Because of the records generated by my case, the prosecution on the others had gone more smoothly. I stood in the produce section for a moment after she walked away, holding a bag of apples, thinking about that. Melissa called me on Christmas Eve. Tyler wanted to say hello, she said, and she was sorry to call if it was difficult. I said it wasn't difficult. Tyler told me he had gotten a telescope and that he could see the craters on the moon and that he had named one of them after me. I told him I was very honored. He said it was a small one, but it had a very good shape. Melissa didn't say much. She said she was sorry, and I believed her. And I also knew that belief did not fix everything and was not supposed to. Some bridges can be rebuilt and some can only be walked across very carefully for the rest of your life. But they are still bridges. I went out to the backyard after I hung up the phone. It was cold, and the ground was frozen, and the dogwood was bare. It is a small tree still. It will take a few more years to fill in properly. I stood there in the cold for a little while and looked at it, and then I went back inside and turned on the porch light, and the old house was warm. I want to say one thing to every father and grandfather and man my age who is watching this and nodding along because something here is familiar. Because someone in your life is looking at your walls and your accounts the way Derek looked at mine. You are not obligated to make it easy for anyone to take what you built. Your name is on the deed, and it matters, and it is not too late to act on it. Get the number of a good attorney. Know what is in your accounts. Do not wait for Sunday. And if you are sitting in a parking lot somewhere trying to decide whether to walk into a police station and report someone you love, I know how that feels. I sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes. And I want to tell you that going in was the right thing. Not just for me, for all of it. For her, too, in the end. You can subscribe to KT, Sweet Revenge, for more stories like this one. Leave a comment below and tell me which moment hit you hardest. I read every single one,